Hey everybody, it's Mark Arnstein and I'm Mark, and of course livingnorthtoronto.com. I am so excited to be announcing our newest venture of social media content, which is start our own podcast show called the Mark Arnstein Show. And it's going to have a great variety of topics of information from health and wellness, fitness, community events. Things are just really kind of going on in the neighborhood from local business owners, new restaurants popping up, those kinds of things. And we're also going to bring in a lot of real estate content as well, from market trends, where the market's going, buying, selling, what opportunities lie ahead, all that kind of amazing information we can give for you. We're going to bring in all kinds of great guests. It's going to be very fun, very informative, and obviously very exciting. Hopefully, you're going to find it exciting. But if there's anything else you want to have more information on, feel free to DM, email, text, whichever works best. We're always happy to chat. But hopefully you're going to enjoy the show. And if you ever need anything, just let us know. Take care, and we'll look forward to speaking to you soon. Bye-bye. Hey, everybody. It is Mark Arnstein, and this is the Mark Arnstein Show. And welcome to episode 1. I am so excited to be doing this, and more excited to have my first guest, my very good friend, Mr. Jas Takhar. Welcome to the episode today, and welcome. Thanks for being here, actually, and thanks for being my first guest.
Mark, I am so honored to be your first guest, brother. I've gotten to know you now, I'm going to say for the last 8-9 months or so. Right. We got to start to know each other through this cool new app, Clubhouse, which is, yes, it's only for iPhone users. I think it's now starting to come out for Android guys and gals.
Android can get on it.
It is?
Android can get on it. Yeah.
And for anybody who's watching or listening right now, it's an audio only app. And so you don't get to see the person. And I heard your voice a few times and I was like, man, there's something about this guy's energy. Like he's always go. You know, you can tell when someone's smiling on the other side of the phone. Right.
Sure.
And I said, I got to get to know this guy. And then you start mentioning like you're in North Toronto and you start to quote all these stats and all this information about Toronto, where I'm from as well. And I'm like, okay, now I kind of get it. Like I get where this energy's from. He's a Torontonian, right? And
not totally.
Yes.
Close.
Right. But you live here now at least.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Right. Yeah.
Totally. It's been 17 years. So I think, I always say you can take the boy out of the West Coast, but you can never take the West Coast out of the boy. Right.
Well, look, I also want to say that Toronto's pumped in a lot.
Exactly. But no, I'm entrenched. Toronto's my home. My children were all been born and raised here, like 2 houses later and everything else. I'm a Toronto boy. Like it is what it is, but I still have my West Coast roots, which is super important.
Well, congratulations on episode 1, getting it started as a fellow content creator myself. I know how tough it is, man. Like to come up with ideas and topics and get guests and then actually do the recording and put yourself out there, which, you were doing before you even started this. Like, I mean, for anybody, if they just take a peek at your Instagram profile, they take a look at your YouTube channel, they'll see the vlogs and all that. So, I mean, it's obviously a natural progression, a natural fit, whatever you want to call it. But big kudos to you. Congratulations. We actually, as the community here in Toronto, Canada, the world, we need more positivity, especially at a time that we're going through right now at the time of this recording. And so thanks for spreading the virus that I like, which is positivity. So thank you for that, man.
No, thank you. And, just to reiterate what you have said as well, and thank you so much for those comments. That's like so greatly appreciated. And it's true. Like we started listening to each other on Clubhouse, and for the realtors are out there that are listening to this podcast, I think if you haven't gotten onto it, you definitely need to get onto it. It is such a great wealth of information and where you can get so many great, amazing ideas and hear so much value for free. Right. And you can hear guys like Jas talk about all kinds of unbelievable stuff. But not only can you hear Jas talk, you can hear guys from like Ryan Serhant. You can hear just Grant Cardone from the States. You can hear just unbelievable speakers all over the place, and you can participate in this and it costs you absolutely nothing. And one of the things I think that's so important within our industry that I want to reiterate is that the more education you get as an agent, and don't just rely on what you hear from other people, walking down the street is so valuable and so important, because the more we can raise the bar of what it is that we do, the better off our industry will become as a whole. I think the more we can educate not just our clients, but also educate the people that we work with as well to make them bigger and better, because there's enough pie out there for everybody to grab a piece of. There's no issue. But the more we can operate on that higher level of standards of practice, the better off everyone's going to be as a whole.
Well, like I love what you just talked about, right, Mark? Because like, how long have you been doing this for? How long have you been in the real estate world for?
You're my guest, not the other way around, pal.
I know. But the reason I asked that is because, as you mentioned, for the realtors that are listening, right? Like, you've been doing this for a long time, but yet you still go to places to learn more.
Yeah, right. So I'm one of the few that started at especially for when I did start at 25, which is a little bit unheard of to be started in the real estate industry, because typically most people will get into it as a second career, or even like potentially a third career, right? So I went in as my first career. I came from a big retail background and selling sporting goods. I was a manager dealing with that at a local distributor in Vancouver, and basically I just kind of gravitated to the business and kind of took off from there. But yes, there's all the mandatory education that we have to do as agents in order to maintain our licenses. But I think it's this kind of stuff that is the difference maker in making you an okay agent to making you an absolutely fantastic agent. And that's the most important stuff, because you're actually getting to hear it in the trenches from people who do it on a daily basis, or in and out of all the experiences and all the things that we get to come across that you're never going to learn from reading a textbook, right? So it's the base to work off of, but this is the real good stuff. Like, this is the stuff that makes and breaks you into an amazing agent.
And that's what I love about podcasting. Not only as a podcast host, but actually as a podcast listener, that you get to apply what I call NET, right? N-E-T, no extra time. You can be driving, you could be on the treadmill, you could be taking your dog for a walk and still learning. Yeah. Like, look, yeah. I think, and you and I know this as Torontonians, that the average person is in their car in their lifetime equivalent to a 4-year degree in university. That's how much driving we do, right? Yeah, so like, we know, get on the 401 at rush hour. And so what are you doing? Look, I'm not saying you have to be listening to audiobooks and podcasts all the time, but like, don't forget that you can use that time, that 4 years of driving that you're going to be spending in your life, to learn a new hobby, to pick up on a new skill, to get better at something that you're already passionate about, right? I mean, there's just, applying net has been huge in my life. It's why I love podcasts, because it allows me to do that on a daily basis. I got a 45-minute drive into the office on a good day, right? And then 45 minutes to an hour back home. That's kind of what I'm just listening to all the time, audiobooks, because your listeners and maybe some of your viewers right now can see some of my books behind me. But I used to be a big reader, but now it's all kind of shifted into audiobooks for me.
Right. Okay. All right. So let's dive into we're having a very fun conversation, but we're totally off topic of what we were supposed to be talking about today, which is actually
we should have put that in the show notes. Hey, Mark, we should have put that in the show notes. Like, these two are not going to stop talking.
Oh my God, totally. Anyways, what I want to give a quick background is that, your parents immigrated to the country back in the early 70s. They bought their first property back in the early 80s. Your parents, one was a factory worker, one was drove cabs, and but they were an amazing positive influence on you growing up, as you and your brothers, who are big sports guys, who were running around like chickens with their heads cut off, and they did everything they could to kind of get involved into your life and be as a positive influence as they possibly could. And I know in your background story, mom realized that there was rental income out of the basement apartment that was in the first house that they bought, and she started going in from there, which kind of led to the whole Jas and investment in real estate. And I think, today it's become, such an important part of what we can do and what we can teach and educate our clients on, and ourselves, because we're probably sometimes our own worst enemies in this, and then we don't listen to our own advice. But where I'm going with this is, you've done an unbelievable job diversifying and going into all kinds of real estate investments to help grow your net worth, right? Because let's face it, at the end of the day, for the realtors who are listening to this, you don't have a pension at the end of the day when you're done selling real estate. All you're going to have is whatever investments that you've made. And the really cool thing about investing in real estate is that there's always constant income going out of these properties because you have people paying you monthly rent to cover your costs. Plus, as you build up your equity, all of a sudden you are now into positive cash flows, which is really an incredible situation to be in. So as I go on my bit of a tangent here, one of the things I want to back that up with is that, especially now in the way the market has gone in Toronto over the last even say 5-6 years, that for a lot of people who have bought over that period of time have built up a lot of equity into their properties, right? Would you agree?
I mean, look, in Toronto, where every 10 years prices double, so the equity that they've built is double from what they bought it from.
Right. And I think is really interesting is that, every year you get a call from your financial planner who will say, let's do a check on your portfolio and see where everything's going and see how well you're doing. If we need to do any, change ups, any diversification, any reinvestment or reallocating of funds, top up the RSP, top up the RESP if you have kids, all those great little things we do with our investment advisors. But what we never seem to do is do an equity check on our homes, right? And given them where interest rates are right now, what a phenomenal time to be able to leverage some of that cash out and actually use it to diversify a bit more and buy some extra real estate that you maybe thought was never possible. So I want to hear more from you, who's one of the experts in doing this, and how have you gone about acquiring the properties that you've acquired, your diversification. I'm going to ask you a whole bunch of questions, so I'll just kind of let you get started because what the basis of where I'm going with this. Yeah,
no, I appreciate that, Mark. First and foremost, I mean, you mentioned my mom about renting out that basement apartment. At that time, she knew that it was just going to help with some of the expenses, right? Nowadays, the cool buzz term that the kids call it and the YouTubers and all that, they call that house hacking. My mom didn't really know what the heck it was called. It just came for her. It was like, I'm going to get $500-600 a month from the basement. That's going to help pay the property tax and some of the groceries, right? And then watching her do that definitely got me thinking about investing, thinking about, this is kind of cool. Like, it helps with the expenses. Then I started to get more information on it. That's, as you mentioned, that's when I really became a salesperson to get more information about investing into real estate. In fact, me getting licensed, I thought I was going to be taught how to invest in real estate. That obviously is not the case. It's just so you don't get sued as a real estate broker. But then I started to really search like the MLS system and try to find some deals, right? For me, though, on a macro thesis, when it comes to investing, I do the boring stuff. And what I mean by that is it's that, watching paint dry, that watching the grass grow, which is buying and holding, buying it, renting it out, holding on to dear life, not trying to sell it, and then refinancing the property. So I'll give you a quick example of what I just did 2.5 weeks ago. So I bought a property back in 2010. It's a small little 1-bedroom condo right at the corner, downtown Toronto, corner of King and Strawn. I bought that for $339,000 to be exact. Call it $340,000. Now, 11 years later, I sent in the appraiser. I went to the bank and said, look, I want to pull out the equity. So they sent in the appraiser and it got valued at a little over $700,000. So right now I had a little over $350,000 worth of equity in the property, but the bank's not going to give me all that $350,000. No. They're going to give me 80% of it. So they gave me 80%. I didn't want the full 80% of the 350. So what I ended up doing is refinancing, pulling out $200,000. Okay. Here's the cool thing with it for anybody who's watching or listening right now is that it was tax free. Yeah. So we talk about values going up, and what you said about the financial checkup, like I totally agree there. What most people do know is what their home is worth. Most people know, my home is worth it's probably, because my neighbor sold, my home is probably worth X. But what we don't know is exactly how much equity we have. They don't look at their mortgage statement often, right? They don't know that you can pull out 80%. So when I pulled out that $200,000 tax free, now what I'm going to do, I can go to Vegas. I can go to Niagara Falls, put it on black and red. Nobody's going to check up what I'm using it for. I don't have to tell them. CRA is not going to come, but I like to grow out my portfolio. And what I decided to do is to buy 2 more condos. So what I, at this time right now in 2021, is I like to do that boring passive investments that I spoke about. I go down the new build route. One of the reasons I like to do pre-construction / new build condos is because I get to buy time. And what I mean by that is that I'm going to buy something today that's going to be built for 4 years from now. Okay.
So now when you do that, as I say, when you do that, so everyone understand how this works, is that you're going in with installments along the way, right? So you're giving a little bit of cash in increments, so it's not the whole $200,000 up front. So,
and that's what I like about it, right? I like the fact that I get to do installments because I can also invest into other things along the way. I can do small passive mortgage investments, help somebody with a second mortgage, charge them anywhere from 8 to 10%. Very, very passive, not a lot of work. Because I know myself, right? Like the shelves around me here, I can't put them up. Everyone on my team knows, don't give Jas a hammer. Right. And so I'm not going to be able to fix stuff. I'm not in the buying, renovating and then flipping. I have tons of clients who make thousands upon hundreds of thousands of dollars doing it, but that's not the type of investor that I am. I like, again, the boring stuff. I have a day job, so I don't really care too much of needing $1,000, $2,000 positive cash flow a month. I'm looking for my rental income to cover my expenses. Because for me, the real juicy part of investing into real estate is that somebody else is paying down my mortgage. That's what, and paying down my expenses, and the passive appreciation. Great. To me, that's icing on the cake. Now, I know in a place like Toronto, for the last 40 years, big sample size, for the last 40 years, we've been seeing anywhere from 7.5 to 8.2% compounding year over year. So it's safe to say, if I want to be ultra conservative, I can guesstimate that values are going to go up every single year by 5%, even if it's only 4%. But as long as it's compounding, I'm making money.
Right. And so there was an article through Blog TO that just went out last week, actually, and it was Knight Frank who wrote it, and it was talking about the premium cities in the world. And Toronto from last year was up 27%. And then in the first 2 quarters of this year, we're up another 15% from last year, and now ranked the fastest growing city worldwide of premium cities. So it just kind of goes to show you what's happening here in Toronto. And, back to your point, like when I used to live in Vancouver, when we bought our first house there before moving to Toronto, it was with a 2-bedroom suite in the basement. So it's kind of ironic. It's kind of like your parents' situation when they bought their house. And I said to my wife, who's from Toronto, I said, that's great. We'll rent out the basement. She's like, what in the world are you talking about? And I'm like, no, but we'll use the rent income from the basement to pay down the mortgage faster. So then we build up more equity in the house. She's like, I'm from Toronto. We don't do that. I'm like, I'm from Vancouver. We do. So basically I convinced her, after a year living in the house, I convinced her to do it. And so when we eventually got to realize we're going to move to Toronto, and we sold the house, and she saw how much equity we pulled out of the house to come here, she was like just flabbergasted. She's like, oh my gosh. She goes, I'm sorry, I didn't agree to do that with you a year sooner than we did. And I said, no, I know. It's okay.
And Mark, I mean, for somebody who's like younger, who's listening right now, we hear it all the time. You hear it, I hear it. Okay, homes are like the affordability, it's gone up. I'm not going to be able to get anything in the city of Toronto. Well, there's a couple of things you can do, in my opinion. You could drive till you qualify, right? Go out a little bit further, or do exactly what you're talking about. Do what what we said my mom did, but flip it, meaning house hack from the perspective of trying to live in the basement and rent out the upstairs, because you're going to get more rental income by renting out the upstairs, as long as you can stomach living in the basement just for a little bit. I'm not saying do that for the rest of your life, but as you want to try to get into the market. So if you're somebody who's renting right now, you really want to have that dream of ownership. what I would strongly advise is look at living in the basement, especially if you're in a 1-bedroom apartment right now. I mean, living in a basement, it's very similar. Okay. You're going to get the amenities of having a washer and a dryer and all that kind of stuff. But the cool thing is that you're building equity because someone's now paying the 3 bedrooms upstairs. They're paying you a higher rent, which is going to bring that mortgage down quicker.
No, totally, 100%. And, at the time we didn't have kids, so it was like no big deal. And we were, and I said, after the first year was up, I looked at her, I said, Sarah, when's the last time you went downstairs to the basement? She's like, never. I'm like, okay, so why don't we do something with it instead of sitting there doing nothing? It's ridiculous. It's all ready to go. And the cool thing is too, if it's going to be your place where you're going to be living, the other thing that's important there is that you can be very much in control about who you rent it to, right? So you get to be extremely picky in particular to make sure that you get the absolutely best tenant who's going to be sharing your house with, right? So we made sure we found 2 grad students that were at the time were going to UBC. It was 2 girls. They were super quiet. We knew they're going to be setting their derrieres off all the time. We didn't hear a peep from them. And, once a month, they'd walk upstairs, hand over their cash. Great, thank you very much. Put it back in the bank, pay down the mortgage, and off we went. And it was the best thing we ever did. The only regret I have is that when we moved to Toronto, because of going into real estate, not, transferring from a corporate job to another corporate job, I wish I actually would have held on to the house in Vancouver, because then I would have had 2 tenants instead of 1 tenant, paying down that mortgage. And I don't even want to go where the value, what it would be worth if I still had it today. It's just like, it's a sore subject.
And we always say that it's one of those cases of I wish I had, and now we're trying to help people. What you're doing, what I'm doing, what we're trying to do together with this episode in itself is that most people hopefully will say, I'm glad I did. I'm glad I kept it. I'm glad I took action, right? Because there's a couple of things that you mentioned there that I wanted to unpack as well, that because I think it's very important. You spoke about the renting out of the basement, and you were quite specific on who you guys wanted to get. Look, I think one of the biggest fears of somebody who's going to become a landlord is managing it, renting it out, dealing with the tenants. But after 16 years of doing this myself personally, I think 98% of the time when there's a problem with a tenant, it was actually the landlord's fault, because the landlord treated the tenant like they're beneath them. And I don't mean logistically because they're in the basement. I mean like beneath them as human beings, because I'm the landlord and you're beneath me because you pay rent. No, you got to flip that. You got to be like, oh my God, Mr. and Mrs. Tenant, what can I do for you? How can I help you? Why? Because if Mark, I was going to give you $10,000 every single year, like clockwork. And it's safe to say, where do I come up with $10,000? Well, if you look at an amortization schedule, that's how much of the principal is being paid down on an average property. It's probably slightly higher, but let's be conservative. Let's not even talk about the passive appreciation, the 18% and the 27% that you were quoting. Just the principal pay down. If I was going to give Mark $10,000, you'd be a little nice to me. I'd come by your place. Like I came by your office not too long ago. First thing you did, what do you want to drink? In fact, even before I got there, you sent me a text message like, hey buddy, I'm already at the coffee shop. What did you want? Like very hospitable. That's what we need to do as landlords is treat these tenants very, very well. Now, is there horror stories from a tenant's perspective? Yes, but very few, very, very few. As long as you do what I think I know you do, and you help your clients with, which is do all the legwork up front. Put the tenants through the ringer.
Totally. And the thing is, now it's even easier than it's ever been in the past because of all the search capabilities that we have today, that you can go and do background information on people, right? So even like, you think about someone calls you and says, I want to go show one of my listings, and it's an expensive listing, oh, you tell me a bit about your client. Oh, you get the name. Oh, great. Now you can go and Google them and see what's going on, what's all about, right? And you can do the same thing with your tenants, right? You can really vet them before you go and agree to put them in your property, and which is so important, because unfortunately, or fortunately, depending on which way you want to look at it, the Residential Tenancy Act has gotten very heavily favored for the tenants. And I get it. I understand it. They want to protect the tenants because tenants should have equal rights, which is fine. It's all good. But as landlords, you just have to make sure you just really do a good job of doing your due diligence to make sure you really understand who's going to be living in your property before you actually go ahead and agree to rent it to them. And back to your point, I mean, I bought another rental property here in Toronto 7.5 years ago. Now I bought down in the beach. It's a duplex. And, I liked it because it was like two separate suites. It was all ready to go. It was relatively turnkey. I didn't have to do much to it. Unlike you, I am a little bit more handy. I will admit, I can swing a hammer and I can screw some things in and I can, play with the tools a bit.
And do you like to do it though, Mark?
Yeah,
do you like to do that?
Yeah,
okay,
I
good.
do.
Okay, good.
Well, so here's the irony of the whole conversation is my grandparents were in the hardware business. Okay. But this is the best part. They started off as a tiny corner store and they grew it into an entire square block. So they would have been equivalent to like a Home Depot today if they had still had the business. But the irony of the whole thing is my grandfather could not use one tool to save his life. Yeah, he sold them and that was his business. Can he screw? Not a chance. He was the worst handyman on the face of the planet. He didn't have a clue what he was doing. It was the biggest joke on the face of the planet. It was actually very funny. But to my point is that when I bought my property, 7.5 years ago, it was a great opportunity. I grabbed it. And the things I like, and here's the part where, having someone who can help you do this stuff, which is super important, is to make it so you understand where the best parts are to go and buy these properties, because it's all about the acquisition price at the end of the day, right? So that's call a spade, is the rents are going to be relatively the same whether you buy in the east end of Toronto, the west end of Toronto, a little up north, a little down south. It's all plus or minus a few dollars. The differential is what you can buy it for. And for what I bought my place for in the beach at that time, if I kept it in Toronto Central, so let's say down at Yonge and Eglinton, for example, it would have cost me at least $300,000 to $400,000 more. But my rent that I was getting from it would have been more or less the same. So the amount of equity I had to put up in order to acquire the property was far less, and it's still appreciated unbelievably well over that same period of time. So, but I was able to get in a lot less money, which is I think the key part of what you're saying from earlier. Like, when you talked about your condo down in King West, that you only took a $200,000 out of when you could have taken a lot more. You just took that little bit of money to diversify a bit more and buy some other property. And I think that's the whole part of it. It almost becomes like a one-time investment, because you can do one time, you invest in buying the first property, let it grow over a few years, then refinance it, and then pull equity out of that one to go buy your next one, and then wait a little bit longer and keep going. And the idea is that each time you do that, the tenants in each property are covering all your expenses along the way, so you're actually not out of pocket.
Well, it's the best ATM in the world from my perspective, right?
Totally.
You just keep going back to it and pulling out cash. The interesting part from something you said when we just got started about talking about investing is that we've never seen interest rates this low. I just refinanced at 1.4%. This is compared to my first property was this condo was my first income property, but my first actual home back in 2006, I paid 4.5% on a 5-year fix. Mark, my brothers and I, because we bought 3 houses like kind of in the same neighborhood, we left that bank like we robbed it at 4.5%. We were that excited about it.
Yeah. Well,
1.4.
I can do you better. I can do you better.
Yeah.
When I bought my first place, other than you, in 97 in Vancouver, I got 6.25% for a 5-year fixed rate. And that was unheard of back then, right? That was like the crazy. So you think about where we've come from, like we're down almost 4.5 points of interest. That is a massive amount of money that you're saving right there. And, and it's not really changing, I don't think, anytime soon from everything I've heard and spoken to and gotten educated about, that we're at these levels for at least a couple more years. And it's going to be so slow and so gradual as they eventually do go up, because let's face it, all things will go up eventually.
Well, they have to. The interest rates have to go up. I mean, we don't want to go into negative interest rates, right? I mean, if you look at what's happened in the economy, in the Japanese economy, I mean, they've been to negative interest rates. It's a black hole that you don't want to enter because it's so tough to get out of, right? I just want to add one more thing to that interest rate conversation that we were just having, where my payment with an extra $200,000 that I refinanced, Mark, my payment didn't change.
Yeah.
Because of the interest rate that I was paying before I did the refinance, I'm at 1.4%. I got $200,000 in my bank account that I'm going to start to reinvest as we speak. And my payment didn't go up. So that was like, once somebody can understand that, I hope anyways, let me say that it starts to get their juices kind of churning and saying, okay, you know what? I'm going to give Mark a call and say, Mark, how much equity is in my house? Because where can I invest it? Right.
Right. And here's the thing, and part that's important about too is like, and I agree, because I'm just in the process of getting my property down the beach ready to get refinanced. And when I looked at what I could do with it, and I saw, oh my God, my payment is literally not changing. This is insane. This is like the best thing ever. But when you're borrowing off the equity in your home, you're borrowing off of it at interest only, which is super important to understand. So it's based off the prime lending rate. So right now, it's 2.25%, I think is prime. So, if you look at it if you borrowed, you went really crazy. And let's say you borrowed $1 million, right, of equity out of your home to really go crazy with. I mean, you're looking at spending $2,225 a month interest only. And the thing is, you can pay that back as much as you want, whenever you want, at no cost, because so as money comes in and as you build up equity in that other property, if you say, look, you know what, I want to go back and refinance the investment property to pull the initial investment back out again and put it back against my home equity line that I borrowed against, you can do that, and there's no cost to doing so from the bank's perspective. So you're really, got so many phenomenal options at your fingertips that you just don't realize you can take advantage of. And I think the point that I want to really make with talking to you about this is that I'm not saying don't invest in mutual funds, don't do your RSPs, don't do your ESPs, for sure, 100%. But don't put all your eggs in one basket either. And I think that's the important part of the lesson here, is that it's good to be diversified, because there's going to be ups and downs. There's always going to be fluctuations that go on in markets, because things go up, things come down. It's the nature of the beast. It's what happens, right? But the really cool thing is, usually what happens is, if one thing's doing extremely well, the one thing kind of settles a bit, and then and then it goes back the other way. So typically I usually find is like when you have stuff in the stock market and it's kind of doing, the real estate part of it's doing extremely well. So if you're diversified, you get to take advantage of those things on a regular basis. So which is kind of a really cool concept. And I know you want to speak, I'm going to cut you off for one more second. I remember Remax did a study. I think this was like when I was still in Vancouver. So this is like, 17 years ago. And it said, if you took the same amount of money and you invested it in the stock market, and you took the same amount of money, you put it into real estate, and you held it for the same period of time, every time they did evaluations at the end of that period of time, real estate always outperformed the investment in the stock market. Right? Because unless you're a day trader, or unless you're actually a guy who does it for an actual living, you're not going to go and play in risky stocks, because you just don't want to run the risk of losing that kind of money. So you're going to go into things that are relatively conservative. So by going into the real estate part of it and putting money into income properties, you have guaranteed income, because there's always going to be someone paying you rent, because someone needs a place to live. So, and
that's what I love about investing into real estate. So I personally don't invest into anything other than real estate as well, and my business, right? But I'm not here to say, because I agree with you, you should diversify. I just kind of found, I kind of have found, how they say water finds its own level. Well, Jas has kind of found his own level now, which means to me anyways, look, I'm going to put all the money. I think real estate is one of the best investments ever. I think the best investment is to invest in yourself first and foremost. And that means listen to podcasts, go to workshops, go get a degree, whatever it is, whatever that means, right? But with real estate, the reason I love it so much is because I can use other people's money.
Yeah.
That to me was what was really what got me to get started when I understood, okay, this is going to cost me $700,000, but I just have to I just need to find 140,000. Like the actual home or the condo or the property, whatever it is, it's 700. I just need to find 140,000 because the regulations here in Ontario, if as an income property, you need to put down, as an investor, you need to put down 20%. So I was like, okay, now I just got to come up with 140,000. So at the start, as more of a lack of a better word, a rookie investor, it was like, okay, I got to come up with 140,000, meaning I got to save it. I got to figure out how I'm going to get it, maybe use it through a refinance. The next phase of that is now just raising $140,000 with friends, family. And don't do business with friends and family. That might be your personal situation. I trust doing business with friends and family, some of them, not all of them. And so I think about, okay, so it's $140,000. Well, I need 2 people with 70 Gs, or I need 10 people with 14,000. Like, there's a lot of ways to skin the cat. Right. Not that I'm into skinning cats or anything, but I mean, like there's a lot of ways.
That's a whole different subject.
That's a whole different podcast. There's a lot of ways to get to the 140,000, and that's how you can really grow out your portfolio. Because some would say, well, Jas, then I got to get involved with 10 other investors in one of your examples. Yeah, but owning 10% of something is better than owning 0. You know what I mean? Totally. And so you then start to do joint ventures with other people, and it just starts to really open up a lot of possibilities.
Totally. And, as long as you got everything agreed upon before you get started, you're good to go. And that's a whole, again, another conversation for a lawyer to come involved and how to structure that whole joint venture agreement. But I agree with what you're saying wholeheartedly. Like, it's like, if you're not sure how to get started, you want to get a couple people together to do a pool, and, away you go. And the thing is, now you are really big on the condo side. I like multi-family stuff because I think you just get a bunch of different diversification in rents. Obviously, there are different kinds of acquisitions. One's a little bit more expensive than the other to kind of get into it in the beginning. But, they're both great. And I think no matter which way you slice it, I think the point we're trying to make here is that keep yourself open to other opportunities that are going to lie in front of you than just sitting with your phenomenal home that has all this equity in it and you're doing absolutely nothing with it. Because if you're not planning to move in the next 5, 7, 8, 9, 10 years, then why not take advantage? And the thing is, if you're self-employed, not even just if you're in real estate, if you're in any other business where you are working for yourself, the interest on all that becomes tax deductible, which is the other key part of it too. So, it's got a lot of upside to it. So when the time comes, if you ever do decide to sell the property, all that interest on that mortgage, any expenses that went along with it, all comes down and help reduce the capital gains that you're going to have to pay on it when you go to sell it. But the other thing I think is super important is, like, you have kids, I have kids. As time goes on, it's going to get harder and harder for these kids to get into the market, and we're going to have to help them get into the real estate market. There's no ifs, ands, or buts if they want to live in the city of Toronto. I mean, it's going to be what it's going to be. So the more we can set them up for the future by owning these kinds of things, I think the better off, obviously, as parents, and we all want to be good parents and help our kids as much as possible, that these opportunities are going to create for them. So, like, my plan is, like, I'm like never selling them. Like, they're for the kids one day. Right? Like, that's just
generational wealth.
Exactly.
Generational wealth, right? I tell my kids all the time, I got 2 little boys, 7 and 5, more the 7-year-old. You might get this depending on how you treat me, what the portfolio I'm building. But
if you're good to dad and you make sure I get fed when I'm old. And,
yeah. Don't worry how you treat mommy, but how you treat daddy. No, okay. My wife might be listening. But yes, I mean, look, it's generational wealth. You said something earlier as well that I really quickly wanted to touch on when you were making the comparison between stocks and real estate, and then you mentioned day trading. The one thing that you need to understand about real estate, it cannot be day traded.
No.
This is a long-term, in my opinion, 10-year window. This is my personal opinion, that you need to look at real estate when you're making that acquisition, because you talked about making sure that you buy low, and obviously, you want to refinance high, not sell, refinance high. It really is something that you should be looking at 10 years, right? Like, what's going to be, because when you see it from that perspective, it's not only what is going to be the forecast of what this property is going to be worth in 10 years, but what's happening in the area. Like, what's the population going to look like? What type of transit might be coming? What employment? What office? What commercial? Like, what retail? What's going to be happening in this area? And you need to have that 10-year window. Like, I think, I read a study not too long ago about Walmart and what Walmart and Costco's do to a certain neighborhood, what a Starbucks does to a certain neighborhood. Well, if you can get that information, you know that those corporations, their research department has been looking at something for a decade at least. And so that might be a good idea. Follow the big money, right? Follow where these corporations are going, because you know that they're going to plop down a Walmart, a Starbucks, or a Costco in an area where there's a lot of people. Where there's a lot of people means there's a high demand for real estate, because people need to live, like you mentioned, Mark. And the one thing cool about Toronto, and Vancouver is very similar in this sense, that we're kind of landlocked. We're on this real estate island, right? You can't build to the south of us. We haven't figured out what Dubai has, where you can build on water. On the northern part, we have this green belt legislation which restricts developers to build. We know this. We know hundreds of thousands of people are coming in, lots of demand, not a lot of supply. That's why values keep on going upwards.
And you nailed it totally 100% on what you just said. And I think the big thing there too is the immigration part that's going to continue to come into the city. Now, yes, it's slowed down a little bit just because of COVID and what's going on, but eventually that's all going to come to an end. And those people are coming here. They're coming here to work. They're coming here to contribute to the economy. They're going to need places to live. They're going to be stable tenants, and it's going to put more and more demand and pressure on the housing market. So, as an investor, the better off you're sitting and buying these things sooner rather than later. You're going to be just golden, like you said, 10 years, 12 years, 15 years down the road, in a really beautiful position of net equity wealth, where, at the end of the day, if you just did your job and when you worked 9 to 5, got your regular bi-monthly paycheck, and you put your little bit of money into your RSPs and all the other things, again, which is fine. But if you really want to build generational wealth, like we're talking about right now, then you talk to anybody who's done it over the years. My grandparents did it. They did, like you were saying earlier, they did it with doing private lending on mortgages. They did it by buying all kinds of commercial property, residential property. Other family, my uncle used to have properties all over California, all throughout Palm Springs, Oregon, you name it, all over. That's how everybody has built wealth, because your job, unless you have you're in a job that has no ceiling to where you can go from an income standpoint, you have no other option but look at the ability to diversify and to buy other things that help make you grow generational wealth. I mean, it is what it is.
And I hope for the viewers and the listeners, you're not looking at two real estate brokers and saying, obviously, you two are going to be speaking about buying more real estate. It really comes from experience that, look, I hope we're not painting a rosy picture where everything's just going to be beautiful and it's going to be very easy. There's going to be some obstacles. You're going to run into financing obstacles when you get to 3, 4, 5 doors, but you're also going to maybe times have a tenant that leaves, but you budget for these things. And as long as you hope for the best and plan for the worst, know that thousands upon hundreds of thousands. You spoke about all the family right across North America, Mark, in your life that has done this. And I think, the last stat, because we've been very statistical heavy on this podcast today, which is kind of cool. 90% of millionaires were done through real estate, right? They all know, right? They all know that that's where they need to go to, because it's something that they can refinance. They can actually use other people's money. That magical word of leverage. It really only happens easily more with real estate. You could do it with stocks and derivatives and all that. You can do it, right? But it's not that common. It's not easy. The regular Mary Jane and the regular Blojo can't do that, right? Where guys like you and I and people who are listening, you can go into a bank, and if you show them a property that is going to be rented out, they actually want to give you money. Like, it's so cool. They want to give you money. Now you got to qualify. And I find that easiest done through the vehicle of investing into real estate.
Yeah, no, but I think, again, you nailed it like you always do. But I think what you said earlier too, like, yes, we are two real estate agents and you're talking about investment in real estate. And I think it's important for everyone listening to understand is that, I'm not trying to sell anybody on, hey, come work with me because I can give you all this phenomenal advice to help go in this direction and buy these kinds of properties. But all I want to get across is that, it's look at the options of diversification, because at the end of the day, you can never go wrong, especially if you're sitting in a position where you have lots of equity in your home. And because the cost of borrowing right now is so extremely cheap, it's never been a more phenomenal time to get into investing in real estate because the leverage cost is so good right now. And that's the important part of this, is that just if you're given any thought to it, I think that's what we're trying to come across with. And, they say they're not making any more land, right? There's just, it's done. That's it. What's here is what's here.
Especially with the amount of people that are coming. Like that is, we talk about immigration from outside of Canada. And look, I mean, during this COVID times as well, right? And this will never, like, I don't go on political rants. If you agree with what the government did or disagree is one thing. But if you look at what other countries did compared to what Canada and how we reacted to it, I think once again, like we did back in 2008 to 2009, with the financial meltdown, the world's looking at us and saying, okay, you guys kind of got this figured out. Like back then they said that. And even now, like, we took care of our people. Yes, we gave them whatever it was, the CERB, the $2,000 a month. And like, I know business is closed and my heart pours out to them, but some of them were family and friends and colleagues. But the world's looking at Canada, and we're a place that people want to come. Right? Like, this is just, it's been like this for a very long time, probably the early 60s, early 50s. For my parents, the dream was to come to Canada. Right. And so when all these people are coming outside of Canada, but also guys and girls like you, Mark, you left Vancouver to come here. Yeah. Right. We don't really think about even just the people that are driving down the 401 from Montreal and Windsor. And there is some that have left Toronto during the COVID time because they wanted to get some more land or whatever it was, or just get out of condos. Like that, we ran through that for a couple of months here. But overall, I mean, there's 150,000 people year over year coming here for the next 10 years. Yeah. Okay. But that's outside of Canada. Yeah. There's still another 50 to 75,000 people coming into the GTA within Canada. Totally. So I mean, these are large numbers we're talking about.
Yeah. And, and like a lot of the massive jobs are focused right here in Toronto. It was interesting. I did a vlog a couple months ago with one of my good friends who's in commercial real estate and does downtown office leasing, and just his whole perspective of where things were going. And, this is just a blip, right, that we're going through right now. It's not necessarily something, catastrophic that's caused this to happen. It's a blip in time where we're going to get out of this and things are going to come back to some high levels of normalcy, and the demands are just going to constantly be going on at an increased level for all these types of products. And, so all we're saying is if you've ever given any thought about it, this would be the time to do it, right? Just look at the opportunity. No one says you have to do it if you don't want to do it. I think it's just about always being open to new opportunities is always a really good thing.
I love it. I mean, you couldn't have said it any better, buddy.
Well, on that note, my friend, I know your time is extremely valuable. And I know between you and I, we could probably sit here and talk for the next 5 hours straight and not even think twice about it. And everyone be like, oh my God, like we got to go home already. Like this is going on forever. Like enough is enough. You guys stop talking. So,
well, before you boot me off, I do have to say, happy birthday birthday. No, I won't. I won't bother your listeners and your viewers. I just wanted to wish you a happy birthday.
Oh, thank you,
brother. And I'm so happy for what you're got yourself into with this show and this podcast. And I'm excited for you. I'm excited for the viewers and listeners because you bring a lot of energy. I get told that a lot, man. But wow, do you ever bring a lot of energy? So just again, congratulations, happy birthdays, and kudos to you, brother.
Thank you, my friend. Thank you. Jas, thank you so much for being here today. I really, truly appreciate it. As always, you've been a wealth of information. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you for watching, whether you're on YouTube or any of the outlets that are out there. And we'll see you again shortly, everyone. Take care. All the best.